Many Medicines is recorded on Treaty 8 territory, the unceded lands of the Métis and the homelands of the Cree and Dene peoples. It is an honor to live and work upon these lands, and through this podcast we commit to uplifting Indigenous voices, sharing stories with respect, and walking in a good way with both the community and the land. Tansei, hello and welcome to Many Medicines, the intersection of art, culture, and healing. My name is Stacey Grant, and I am a Métis artist and educator here in Nistawayu, also known as Fort McMurray Wood Buffalo in northeastern Alberta. I created this podcast as a way to make a space where stories are served and honored rather than extracted. I thought it was important for youth to be able to have a place that they could look to, where maybe there was a path that they're walking where they needed to see that reflected, or even just to see somebody looking like them. Thank you for being here, and enjoy the show. Tansei, thank you so much for coming and being on the show today. Would you like to introduce yourself, who you are, where you're from, and what role you play in the community?
My name is Leona English. I've lived here off and on since 1973. I'm originally born in Uranium City, Saskatchewan. Grew up half of the time up in Fort McMurray. Spent a lot of time in the trapline. My husband and I, we were coming up to Fort McMurray by boat. And he said, we need to stop at Bob Grant's. He says, just in case they want something, because we're only going to be in town for 2 days and we're coming back. So as we pulled into the bottom of the hill, and there was this moose standing on top of the hill, and there was a young man feeding this moose potatoes.
Yeah.
Not apples or anything, but potatoes. And I was just so blown away from that, and that image has never left my mind even after being 68 years old.
I love that so much. It's like I'm trying to rack my brain on which of my uncles that would have been. So I'm thinking Uncle James, but if he was a bit older, it might have been Uncle Robert. I'm not sure.
At the time when we seen him, I'm going to say he was under 15.
Under 15? I'll have to do the math.
Yeah. And your grandma and Bob, they were elderly people already at that point. I mean, they were not young people.
Yeah.
And I think it was you that told me that Fish and Wildlife got that moose and moved them to a farm or something.
Yeah, it ended up getting too big or something, and they didn't want it to end up getting hunted or hurt, so it went to a wildlife reserve outside of Edmonton.
That was so nice, because apparently they found that little moose.
Yeah,
as a baby.
Yeah, it was like trapped on an island.
Yeah.
Going like through the Athabasca, I guess, and it couldn't get off, so they put it in the boat. And they brought it back. Yes. It's just like only Granny.
And that's amazing, I think, and that just goes to show just how caring people could be, where they would take a poor little abandoned moose and care for it. Yeah. As my husband and I had baby beavers.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we also found these baby beavers. There was 2 of them. There was 3 of them, actually, but the one passed away within the first evening that we had them.
Yeah.
And they were so tiny.
Yeah.
And he got a hold of Fish and Wildlife, and they came and picked them up with a chopper at that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we used to keep them in a wash tub.
Yeah.
In a house. We had them in a house because we didn't want to put them outside.
Yeah. Have them freeze or something like that.
Have them, something happen to them or lose them,
Yeah.
Because they wouldn't survive. Because they were only about that big.
Oh.
And they were just a brown fuzz.
I love it.
They were so cute. with my son, we had baby skunks under one of our wood sheds.
Yeah.
And he wanted one so bad.
Yeah.
So I went under there with a fishnet and I said, you stand guard. I said, that mom's got to go hunting.
Yeah.
I said, when she leaves, we'll get you a baby.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. She came back and sprayed us.
Yeah.
But I still got the baby skunk.
Yeah. So we got to have it for a little while and then you put it back out.
Yeah, and I told him, I said, we can't keep it very long. I said, this baby skunk is just like literally a baby. He didn't even have teeth at that point. Right? He was just tiny. He was only about this big.
Yeah.
He was smaller than a squirrel.
Yeah.
And then we put him back.
Yeah, what an amazing experience. When you think of like most children growing up nowadays, the only time that they see any kind of wildlife, I guess, is
in zoos.
In a zoo. They don't, I remember the first time I had friends over when I was in like elementary school or high school, and they saw a blue jay in our bird feeder.
Yeah.
And they lost their minds. And I was just like, I've always grown up where my dad had probably like 6 bird feeders around the yard, it's just normal. And they're just like, oh my God, is that a squirrel? I'm like, how have you never seen a squirrel before? But there's such an intentional disconnect.
Yeah, there's,
happens,
and that is something that I think that's why I love berry picking, because I almost feel like I'm going to visit the wildlife again.
Yeah.
And this year I had to contend with 4 bears.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there weren't that many berries this year, I heard. I didn't get a chance to go out and pick.
I don't know. Where I went, I did okay.
Very good.
I did 64 pounds of blueberries.
Oh, wow. That's a lot of work.
I did 15 pounds of raspberries until I got stung by bees. So I said, fine, keep them.
Yeah.
And I got about 20 pounds of cranberries. Cranberries were kind of scarce.
Yeah.
But, and then the one patch I went to, we had 2 bears in there. And finally I told my picking partner there, Susan Jensen.
I love her.
Oh, she's amazing.
Yeah.
And I said, they're not bothering us.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, we might as well leave, because I said, we can't concentrate on what we're doing because we're too busy concentrating on where they are.
Yeah.
So we just left. I've never really been bothered by bears.
Mm-hmm.
I've picked around them. I'm not overly afraid of them, but I'm also, I also keep a good eye on them, where they are. And same thing with the deer.
Yes.
I've had one that I wasn't sure what that deer was wanting to do, but he kept kind of coming closer to me. It's one of my northern patches.
Yeah.
And then, I'd make noise and he would hop away for like 10 feet.
Yeah.
But he'd come back.
Yeah. He's like, what are you doing over there?
Yeah, so.
What you got in that bucket?
Pretty much, I think,
Yeah.
But other than that, no, I'm quite comfortable around wild animals. It's maybe because I was around them. So much over the years.
And I think it sounds like you really listen to them and respect them.
Yes.
Right? So it's respecting the boundary of the animal, or even with the bear where you're like, okay, you know what? This isn't the time to do it right now.
Yeah.
I think that when people aren't able to listen to the story or listen to the message that the land is sending them, then that's kind of where the fear gets cultivated, is because they're just trying to force their way into a situation.
Yeah,
Right?
It very well could be. Well, like I said, you gotta respect the land.
Mm-hmm.
And the wild animals, they're in it because that is their home.
Yes.
So, yeah. Never take what you don't need, right?
Mm-hmm. For sure.
That's one of me and Mike's big theory. Mike, he won't kill female animals.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's future generations.
Yes.
He always says.
Yeah.
But if we kill a mama moose, well, we're not going to have any babies next year from that mama moose.
Yeah.
And that's so, yeah.
That's a good teaching to pass forward.
Yeah,
for sure.
and that is very important, and that's what he teaches his children, that don't kill female animals.
Very good. Mm-hmm.
Keep, and even he eats ducks. I don't eat ducks.
Yeah.
But if it's, he won't hunt ducks on when they're laying their eggs and stuff like that, because You know, you might be leaving baby duckies.
All by themselves, yeah. Well, and it's, you know, I think that's the piece of environmental stewardship that goes along with food sovereignty, right? Being able to provide food for yourself while still being a steward and a protector of the land.
Yeah.
Right? So.
Yes, we definitely need more people to be stewards of the land. Definitely.
Yeah. As you move through life now, how do you integrate all of these different teachings that you've kind of collected and accumulated? How do you utilize them in your day-to-day life?
I think sometimes I have to prioritize things, what's more important to get done for today, or you know, or what I want to do more, because there is so many different things that I want to try and make.
Yeah.
And but there's just not enough time in a day, right?
Yeah, I hear you.
You know, to try to get all this done.
Yeah.
It's just like today, I've been on a go since 10 o'clock this morning. And when I sit back and look at it, like, I haven't done a whole lot, you know?
Yeah.
Other than going up and down the hill 3 times in one day.
Yeah. I get you. When it's a busy day, but at the end of the day, you're kind of like, oh, I feel like I didn't get anything done. But it's like you did get things done.
I did get things done.
You know?
And then when you look back, oh yes, well, I got this shopping done. You know, I went there, did that, helped out this person. You know, and, you know, offered a ride for somebody. And that, so yeah, that way yes, I still got lots done.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that in today's culture, we base so much off of checking things off a list, where it's like, when you kind of look back at how our people used to live, it was like, obviously we had lists, we had things to do, but they were directly rooted to survival and well-being.
Yes.
Whereas I feel like nowadays there's a lot of fluff and things where it's like, we feel more valuable when we're perceived as busier, if that makes any sense.
It does make sense, because, I don't know, for me, busy is good. I don't like a lot of downtime. And I find that I don't want to be able to, I don't want to sit and say, well, geez, I'm bored today. Because there's always something to do.
Absolutely.
You know, regardless, and throughout the day, there's always something to do. And then you also have to find some personal time. What I find personal time is like, you know, you're rejuvenating, get the relaxed time. You need to do that. Every now and then you need to just have a me day.
Yeah.
And I try to fit one of those in. And for me, a me day is watching a TV program. Just to sit there with even turn off the phone. You know, that's my me time.
Yeah.
And I think that's important for healing as well, is to have a little bit of personal time.
I think so too.
You know, because I mean, as you know yourself, you're a mom, I'm a grandma, and there's, you know, the kids are always phoning, they want this, they need this, or, you know, Grandma, can you drive me over here? Grandma, can you make cabbage rolls for tomorrow? You know, just simple things like that.
Yeah.
Which I just did actually 2 days ago. Madison called me and said, Grandma, I want cabbage rolls. She didn't ask me if I would make them. She says, I want. That's how my grandchildren.
Yeah.
You know.
They know they don't even have to ask. They're like, Grandma's got me.
You know, they don't tell me please or anything. They just say I want.
Aww.
So I did a tray of cabbage rolls for Madison and one for us too. But, you know, it's just little things like that. You know.
Well, it's important to be able to reclaim that little bit of time for yourself.
Yeah, it is. And, you know, anybody, no matter what age you are, I think you need that time.
Yeah.
It's very important.
I agree.
Otherwise, you can get overwhelmed and say, oh my God, I'm so behind on this. But no, you're not. You need to slow things down sometimes.
Yeah, for sure. That's been a hard lesson for me where it's like, especially last year, I was doing so much and then it's just my body shut down and I got so sick. And it was so funny because Elder Virginia had warned me. She said, you're working yourself sick and it's going to be bad. And I'm just like, oh no, I'm fine. I'm okay. And then a week later, I was just like, she was right.
Yeah.
I'll never doubt her again. But
it does happen. That's why I said a personal day, or a personal hour sometimes. Mm-hmm. It's amazing just how healing that could be.
Mm-hmm.
Just to have that.
How would you advise somebody who, whether they're a new mom or, like you said, even an established mom or a grandma or just anybody in life, how do you kind of set those boundaries to be able to take that time to care for yourself?
Sometimes you have to say no.
Mm-hmm.
Even though that, it puts the other person out, but sometimes just, you have to be able to say, no, I can't go over there today.
Mm-hmm.
No, I really can't do this today, but, I can do it tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
Just sort of postpone it for when you're less busy because, like, as in my age, this is what I've learned,
mm-hmm.
even myself, is if you keep going and going and going and get no rest, like you said, you can get sick or,
mm-hmm.
Something can happen. And you don't want that because you still need that little personal healing time. I think it's very important.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for that insight. Because like I said, I'm learning to say no. It's very hard.
It is.
Yeah.
It's really, really hard because a lot of times you don't want to say no,
Mm-hmm.
It's just like today, I didn't have a whole lot of extra time to drive this person from Gregoire all the way to Mac Island, wait for them there, then drive them all the way to Timberley.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, okay, I will do it today because I can't tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just like I said, I can't do this every day. Today is a one-time thing that I will do this. But I try to understand and help out the homeless too.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and that's good. Whereas, I think some people forget that they're also members of our community.
They are, and then, a lot of our less fortunate people, what I find, a lot of them chose to be there, but a lot of them didn't choose to be there.
Mm-hmm.
And they are humans just like we are, so why look down on them?
Exactly. Well, and in this economy, in this day and age, the things that exist, you never know if it could be you or a loved one who ends up in that position.
Exactly. And the way I look at it, if I was ever in that position, I would be very happy if somebody said, well, here's a hand, I'll help you today, and that. So, and then that's why my parents were really, really strong believers in that.
Mm-hmm.
Help somebody today because maybe 10 years down the road, it'll come back to you where you're going to need that help.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it'll be provided for you.
Yeah.
And I believe that.
Beautiful. Well, it sounds like your parents really instilled that belief in, reciprocity of spirit, self, and soul, where it's, being able to, whether you're taking or not, being able to give in a way that is healthy.
You're, it didn't take anything from me other than an extra hour of my day to do this. That's it.
Yeah.
Didn't cost me anything to do it. And, if I'm able to help somebody the way I look at it, do it.
Beautiful. Yeah. Do you find that when you work with, you said like your grandchildren, some of your granddaughters are interested in beading. Do you find that it's something where you notice it when they're very, very young, that they have an interest in arts and culture? Or is it something where you find as they get older, they start to get drawn towards it when they need that medicine?
I think they get drawn to it now that they get older, and I think the other thing that helps them along with that, because they've seen it as they're growing up. Because my grandbabies, like their grandmother Vina, also sews, right?
Yeah.
So whenever they're there, they see it there, and then when they come to my home, well, they see it there too. You know, because I have knit them sweaters and socks and hats and mitts, and I have one, Madison is learning how to crochet as we speak.
Very cool.
You know, and the other one is learning how to bead.
Yeah.
And making things. You know, and then some of her pieces, when I go do like my craft markets, well, I take some of her pieces with me, right?
Oh, I love that.
You know, and then when I sell them for her, well, she said, oh, you know, I made this, but it got sold for this, you know, stuff like that. So, and then plus I encourage them.
Yeah.
You know, to keep it going. And that, because I always tell them, you know, once all your grandmothers are gone, there may not be somebody else here to teach you how to do this, or, you know, show you how it can be done. And that, so yes, I'm very proud of them that they're interested in learning.
Yeah, for sure. Well, they're very lucky to have you as a grandma where you're also willing to teach and encourage, because there's a lot of youth where they don't necessarily have somebody, whether they have the knowledge or they have the ability or openness to be able to share in that way, where I think some people carry a lot of hurt and they're very closed off to being able to share, if that makes any sense.
It does. I do believe it does in a lot of ways, but that's another healing way I think one can find the peace, talking about, you know, even talking about their past hurts, you know, and how they can get past that. I have a lady friend. She comes and spends the summer with me every year, you know, and she's had a lot of bad experience. I don't even know how to put it, but, and then, so I've also showed her how to do some crafts, and then just, you know, just talking, sometimes just talking to another person.
Yeah.
Under the confidentiality, you know that it's not going to go past that person, and you're more free.
Yeah, you're lighter.
Yeah,
after you're not carrying it.
You feel lighter of talking, and her and I, we've had funny conversations, and we had serious conversations, and you know, and it's not only healing for her, but it was also healing for me. You know, to be able to have an open shoulder, an open ear for somebody else. You know, even though that a lot of times that person, you don't go through those same hurts as that person, but maybe a little bit different. But being open to that, I think it helps them and also helps you.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, well, it sounds like from your experiences that like communication has been a really beautiful medicine as well, and connection. Yes. Connection to another person, not just the arts, and not, you know, a big part of culture is how we connect to one another. Yeah.
I think connecting is very important.
Okay.
You know, even if you're from a different culture, you know, people have different beliefs, and I have my own beliefs. You know, some people don't approve of my beliefs, but
can't please everyone.
You can't please everybody, and you know, that's how I feel, and I am never shy to talk about my feelings. And I think that's another thing that's important, is be open with your feelings.
Okay.
You know, because it may help somebody else. Maybe not necessarily you, but it may help somebody else and help them open up. with different things, right?
Yeah, I really do believe that we're put on this earth to, even if it's just to tell our story in a small space where you never know who needs to hear it.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And sometimes that's all it is just lending an ear to somebody else's problems, or their hurts, and sometimes just having them be able to speak openly and freely without being judged of anything. I think that's important.
Yeah. What are your dreams for the local Métis community moving forward?
I think we need to share more knowledge, more traditional experiences. Maybe go out into the land, not necessarily do anything over there, but show our community like the openness of what our forest can provide for us. Like going out there, just enjoying like the peace and quiet away from traffic.
Yeah.
And because when I go out there, sometimes I just sit, because I always take lawn chairs with me. I just sit there and then just enjoy listening to the squirrels and the birds and how peaceful it is. And because when you live in a city, you don't necessarily have that.
Yeah.
You have to go out there to, I think we need to do more stuff like that, more art classes. I'm not a painter by any means. I think I'll stick to beading.
I loved your painting. I thought you did great. But yeah, I agree with the getting out on the land idea, and in a way where it's not necessarily rooted in productivity, but it's rooted in wellness.
Yes,
Yeah.
just the wellness. And maybe even, everybody brings something. Bring snacks and just sit around and just talk about whatever comes to mind.
Yeah.
Not necessarily geared at anything specific, but just the fact of getting out there. And I think our Métis local can provide that.
I think so too.
They have the transportation for the ones that are unable to take themselves out there. Carpool with people, right? And go out there. There is lots of places that I can take them. I think they can have the serenity of that.
I think so too. And I think that would be a really beautiful opportunity for connection with all of the citizens as well.
Yeah, and not necessarily only for the elders, because we also have to include our youth in these things, not only because I find them, our Métis, they do a lot of things for the elders, like for the craft programs and that, but we also need to include our young.
Some intergenerational.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like fit for all ages type thing or something like that.
Yeah, for sure. I agree. Family nights.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Family outing.
Yeah. That would be cool. And then jumping off of that one, what are your hopes for your children and grandchildren?
Well, I only have the one child, and he already does all bush stuff. He does all the hunting.
Yeah.
He's the one that's responsible for filling our freezers. and that, and I'm a big help on that one because I help him process the foods and that, like making dry meat, canning, and preparing for storage and vacuum sealing and all that. I do all that with him.
Yeah.
And we also involve the grandchildren with that. So they also have the knowledge of how to do that once we're all gone, right?
Yeah.
And my oldest granddaughter, well, she has a trapline license. She goes out trapping with her dad. And my middle granddaughter, if high heels can't go there, then she shouldn't be there. And the two youngest ones, they absolutely love going out and doing stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
And I hope they continue that when they have families of their own. And the knowledge and the experience get carried on onto their children.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure it will, because the way that it's been passed on to them, it has been passed on in a way that is rooted in love.
Yes.
In love and continuity, right?
Yeah. It's like, they grew up with it, and that's a hopefully.
Is there one story or a piece of advice that you would like for listeners to take with them?
There's knowledge and sharing. And loving. Loving is very important. I think, as we go on in life, as the busyness in life, I think we need to tell our loved ones that we care about them and they're never alone. I think that's important to share along with everybody. Rather if they're your family or an absolute stranger. Because a lot of times sharing your love and kindness to another person goes a long ways.
Beautiful. How do you hope that the next generation carries forward different traditions and values and knowledge? How do you hope that they hold it?
From talking to not necessarily their elders, because look at you with all the experiences that you have. A young person can share. Sharing is very important. I think that's important for our next generation to continue. Share what you know. Share what you've learned. Like, I like sharing what I've learned. If somebody else is wanting to take the time to learn what I've learned, I am more than happy to share my knowledge with them.
Yeah, for sure. Also, thank you. That means a lot coming from you, where you're someone that I have admired since before I met you. I followed your artwork, and I've just loved the way that you've interacted with the community and being able to build, I would say, a friendship that is rooted in kindness and reciprocity and respect has been a great honor for me. And it's been so wonderful having you here, and I really hope that it's something where you can come and talk to me again. Is it okay if you would like to share your business and what you provide as a service? And then I can put your email address on the screen for people to contact you if they would like to hire you for your beautiful beadwork.
Yeah, I do take orders.
Okay.
I need a bit of time from the time that they do it. If there's anything like that they're interested or they want photos of my crafts that I do, they're more than welcome to contact me. I also do some catering for mostly only for the Métis.
Okay.
And I go from beads to bannock.
Yes. Okay, well, thank you again for coming. I am so grateful for you. I appreciate you so much, and I look forward to many more conversations in the future where we continue to learn from one another.
Absolutely. And thank you for the invite on this. I had a wonderful time.
Yay.
Just talking to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much.